in our communities.
I don't think that defunding the entire police is the answer. I think they need reforms. I think they need better accountability.
What's at stake for me is the lives of my children.
Big changes on the table at City Hall as Toronto looks at their version of defunding the police. The movement to defund police has picked up steam in the last few weeks following a number of deaths of Black, Indigenous, and people of color at the hands of police officers. Today, councillors debated what changes to Toronto's service would look like. Chris Glover walks us through what was on the table today.
Graffiti etched on the Toronto sign, and this community of tents will remain in front of City Hall until protesters say policing in Toronto is drastically changed.
It's really obvious that we have a problem with police brutality and state-sanctioned violence. And so we just figured that it was time to come together and solve the problems ourselves.
What I'm asking you to do is show courage.
City politicians, meantime, virtually debated a plan by Councillor Josh Matlow to cut 10% from next year's police budget.
Because I know that changing the status quo is scary. I understand that if we are to vote to cut even a small percentage of the police budget, 10% doesn't go nearly as far as many people would like us to, Frank.
We've already discussed the budget 4 months ago. How's this even in order?
Some incorrectly thought it was a debate about cutting this year's police budget, but others understood and were more clear they didn't like it.
Would that jeopardize community safety in the city?
Absolutely. If it was just a cut, then yes, it would absolutely jeopardize community safety.
10% less for police would equal more than $100 million and lead to roughly 1,000 police members being laid off.
If there were a reduction around the magnitude of what you are suggesting, there would no doubt be a huge reduction in some of those diversity composition, if you will, of the service currently.
Well, we'd never step in.
Today, the Premier says he won't interfere with whatever City Council decides, but again argued against cutting police.
But I think it's absolutely critical we keep as many police on the streets.
Mayor John Tory's plan doesn't specify any financial cut to the police budget, instead calling for the creation of a non-police-led response to mental health crises. That plank of his plan comes following the deaths of Black and brown people at the hands of police during what are called wellness checks. Regis Korchinski-Paquette died after falling from her High Park balcony after police responded to her in mental distress. In Minneapolis, the defund police movement saw renewed energy following the police killing of George Floyd. Now there are plans to disband the police force there altogether.
Why aren't we doing that here? Our city council can't even entertain the possibility of making structural changes that would improve the lives of Black and Indigenous people.
And so, Dwight, a little bit of breaking news here. It did look like Josh Matlow's initiative here to cut the police budget by 10% had the deck stacked against it. And I can tell you that his amendment to John Tory's motion to cut the police budget by 10% has failed. So that will not be going ahead, Dwight.
Yeah, those protesters behind you aren't going anywhere for a while, so this will continue. Thank you, Chris. There's a slight jump in COVID-19 cases reported by the province today. Ontario has confirmed 257 new cases of the virus. It's the first time in almost a week the province's cases has surpassed 200. But 177 of those cases are in the Windsor region, following targeted testing of migrant farm workers over the weekend. The province completed more than 27,000 tests in total, and there are 7 new COVID-related deaths reported. Since the first agri-farm worker tested positive in Windsor, Essex in March, there have been nearly 700 cases in farm workers, a majority of them migrant workers. Katerina Georgieva explains.
There's no way in hell we could continue this, and to see the numbers skyrocket like this is outrageous. This is outrageous to Black and brown workers. This is racism plain and straight. That's what's happening.
Justice for Migrant Workers is calling for the immediate shutdown of the agricultural industry in Ontario. They say this should have happened a long time ago to ensure the safety of workers. They want workplaces completely sanitized with safety measures in place. But some say that would be going too far.
You shut down that entire industry, then you're shutting down food supply. You're killing economic business. We deal with facts, not just emotion. And I think their comments are purely emotional.
But the mayor of Kingsville says he could support a lockdown on specific farms with the biggest problems. In the meantime, Kingsville and Leamington officials are also working to secure housing for those who need to isolate. They're bringing in the Red Cross to assist, and they say calling on the military is also an option. The mayor of Kingsville says he'd also like to see a task force put in place.
Similar to the review that the province has announced for long-term care centers and the overhaul, we're pushing that the province and the feds come together and make that same request for this sector, specifically around housing.
Supporters rallied for protections for migrant workers on Sunday as on-site testing results started pouring in. 196 positive cases in the last 3 days among agri-farm workers, with a single farm being the site of at least 175 cases. Now, the health unit has to investigate every new case to find out how workers caught COVID-19 and who they may have spread it to. For this, dozens of employees are being brought in from other health units in Ontario to assist. Also today, clarity from the province's Associate Chief Medical Officer of Health on whether or not positive asymptomatic workers will be allowed to work, which the province last week said would be permitted. But today, a different message from one of its top medical officers.
We are not applying that policy until we determine that it is the correct conditions for it. That guidance was developed, I think, in view of having a very small handful of asymptomatic positive people. We don't have a small handful in this instance.
As for whether or not that single farm with 175 cases should be shut down, she says it should be considered. Katerina Georgieva, CBC News, Windsor.
Premier Doug Ford highlighted another issue today, contractors moving from farm to farm offering migrant workers for hire. That's something the health unit in Windsor-Essex tried to put an end to on June 1st, issuing an order that employers could only have people working at one farm.
We're reaching out to all the farmers. We're giving a list of these recruitment agencies. Some are, we found out, some are fly-by-nighters and just trying to make a quick buck, so we're going to put an end to that. And we have, I believe there's been 70 orders given to some of the farms.
To force us to wear a mask or not to force us to wear one, that is a question mayors in the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area have been discussing. They had a conference call about whether to make masks mandatory in their respective cities. Alicia Son has more on what they decided.
By now, you should know how to wear a mask, like this, not like the Deputy Prime Minister of Belgium. Even he's probably got the hang of it by now. So, these days, the question is, should masks be made mandatory? Well, all the mayors of the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area say yes.
In Mississauga, I've been hearing from our residents that they are in favor of moving towards mandatory masks. And certainly in Brampton, Mayor Brown has been hearing the same. We will be moving in that direction after we do consultation with our councils next week. And I know that Toronto Council is meeting today and tomorrow, and that topic will be discussed as well.
They will be collectively calling upon the provincial government to implement a mandatory mask order for all large cities. So far, it's been up to the individual municipalities to make the rules, but they believe they are stronger together as a region to contain any flare-ups.
It certainly would facilitate a more easy transition into phase 3.
You would have to wear a mask in all indoor public spaces like malls and transit. Up until now, it's just been recommended by health officials to do so.
Mandatory, I think, would do a good thing in terms of cutting down virus, but it's hard to enforce. And so as our numbers are coming down, it's harder and harder to get people to pay attention to wearing masks.
Dr. Peter Lynn's got a point. Why, though? Is a fair question considering our COVID-19 rates keep going down. At least that's how some folks have been feeling. Lauren Holmes launched an infographic-y website that puts the latest public health recommendations in language that resonates more with youth.
I mean, all of the other messaging they've been putting out towards youth especially hasn't been sticking with them. So why would youth listen to the mandatory masks? We are like the groups gathering in massive amounts at the beaches and stuff. So emphasizing that, maybe even the masks, directing it towards youth specifically and other age groups, in like a way that will resonate with them is important.
The municipalities have the coming week to come up with a rollout strategy. In the meantime,
We're just relying on people to uphold their civic duty.
Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
A Toronto man is sounding the alarm about a job scam preying on people who are out of work in the midst of COVID-19. He applied for a job that was posted on LinkedIn and soon learned it was a ploy to steal thousands of dollars from him. Nicole Ireland shares his story.
Tony Moniz has been trying to keep busy around the house since March when he was laid off from his telecommunications job due to COVID-19.
I want to work. So sitting at home and doing little projects, it doesn't do well for me. I wasn't brought up that way.
So when he saw an account coordinator position for Sobeys posted on LinkedIn, a site used by job seekers every day, he applied. Representatives claiming to be from Sobeys contacted him, had him fill out an online questionnaire, then interviewed him by phone and ultimately offered him the job. In this new pandemic normal, the process didn't set off any alarm bells.
I really wasn't thinking about it because, as I say, a lot of things are going towards the online, at-home work for the COVID.
Then, a man Moniz thought worked for Sobeys told him to order about $4,000 in supplies to set up his home office from a specific company. He received this check and was told to deposit it in his bank account as reimbursement. Something didn't feel right, so Moniz alerted his bank.
And then my bank called me, I think it was like 3:50 on Monday, and they said, just so you know, we looked at those emails. They're on the blacklist. It's fraud.
This RCMP intelligence analyst says scams like this have been on the rise during the pandemic.
A lot of people are out of work and will be looking for work, and it's ripe for fraud right now.
But there are some red flags people can watch for.
The key indicators when somebody's sending you money and asking you to sort of process a payment or return money.
In an emailed statement to CBC News, Sobeys says it is aware of fake Sobeys career websites and that we are working hard to stop this fraudulent online activity. LinkedIn says when this type of activity is detected on our platform, we work to quickly remove it and prevent future recurrence. In the meantime, Tony Moniz hopes both companies will take stronger action to protect job seekers against fraud. As for him, he hopes to be called back to work with his telecommunications employer very soon. Nicole Ireland, CBC News, Toronto.
Remember, if you have a story you would like us to look into, just send us an email, torontotips@cbc.ca. Colette, it feels like the heat is back, but I'm not sure we're feeling the humidity that was there the last time we had a heat wave.
Yeah, it's just starting to creep up, Dwight. I tell you, by the end of this week, as we get into the month of July, there'll be no doubt you'll be feeling it. And these are the temperatures, not just the daytime highs, but the fact that it's almost 6:15, and these are the current temperatures. So it is 31 degrees right now in Toronto, and it's 31 in Mississauga. It's still 30 degrees in Markham. I will factor in the humidity. Your Humidex values right now, it almost feels like 35. So, okay, there's definitely some humidity there. It's going to pump up a little further as we get towards the end of the week. So actually, it's the next couple of days where we get a tiny bit of a break, if you can believe that, where our highs are only going to be in the upper 20s. You can see just a little bit of energy here around Clarington, just to the south of, with that little cell that's popped up there. That's going to be passing across the lake, and so a little bit later here, it's going to be showing up with a little bit of wet weather there around the Niagara region. That'll be around 10, 11 o'clock. The model's picking that one up. Otherwise, primarily dry until you get over towards eastern Ontario. Severe thunderstorm watch over there. But watch towards tomorrow afternoon. A little bit of a lake breeze as I'm going to wind this forward. And yeah, we may see just some isolated showers kind of showing up, and then they're going to die off as we get into the evening hours and lose the sun and some of the heat. So that's really going to be the story, that mostly it stays dry. Few areas will get a bit of wet weather. We've got a dry week primarily ahead. 28 tomorrow. Wait till I show you where those temps are going, though, Dwight.
We will check back with you for that. Thanks, Colette.
Looking forward to it.
The weather is brought to you by Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand. We test, so it runs. It's hard to stop a train.
A firefighter and 2 others, including a 90-year-old woman, were taken to hospital after a 3-alarm fire near Manning and College around 1:30 this morning. Toronto Fire says it started in an adjacent garage and spread to the upper floors of that house. The flames quickly spread to nearby homes, causing crews to evacuate the adjacent buildings. The homeowner suffered serious burns and was taken to hospital. The firefighter is recovering from minor injuries. The cause of the fire is still under investigation. We're finding out some new information about the 20-year-old man accused of causing a devastating crash in Brampton 2 weeks ago that killed a mother and her 3 daughters. Court documents obtained by CBC Toronto showed that Brady Robertson had been convicted of multiple driving offenses in the past, including driving while under suspension, using unauthorized plates, and failing to surrender his insurance card. Robertson is also facing a dangerous driving charge after police believe he was behind the wheel of the car in this video, seen mounting a sidewalk while a pedestrian tries to pull the driver out. Now Robertson is facing 4 counts of dangerous driving causing death in connection to this crash, where Carolina Chisulo, her 3 daughters, Kiara, Liliana, and Mila, were all killed. Enough is enough. That's the message from the Ontario government today as it announces a task force to combat fraud and corruption in the towing industry. It comes after a series of shootings and murders involving tow operators and complaints from the public that the industry needs better oversight. John Lancaster has more.
To all the bad actors out there, my message is very clear. The party's over.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford announced the task force today. By fall, there could be new province-wide oversight of the towing industry.
They are operating in an industry that lacks oversight, structure, and where too many criminals are making their own rules.
For 2 years, organized criminals have been fighting it out for access to crashes, lucrative towing, repair, and storage business. 3 tow truck drivers have been killed, rival trucks torched. More than 40 arrests have been made, among them 4 police officers accused of taking kickbacks from tow truck drivers.
I felt like I'm very unsecure here.
Sayed Gunay hopes the province regulates towing and storage costs. He just got a massive bill after a seemingly minor accident on the QEW.
They charged me like around $14,000 bill, so I'm very disappointed.
His insurance company will likely be on the hook. Pete Caragiorgio says standard rules across the province will benefit insurers and consumers.
Currently, it's a patchwork quilt. Some municipalities have regulations and bylaws and oversight, others don't. So from the consumer standpoint, it's really an uncertain environment.
It's estimated tow-related fraud cost insurance companies $1.2 billion a year, or more than $200 extra on the average auto policy. John Lancaster, CBC News, Toronto.
Dozens of photo radar cameras in Toronto will begin ticketing drivers who speed starting a week from today. There are 50 around the city, well actually 49, because one is now missing. Toronto police say one of the automated speed enforcement cameras was stolen from the Queen and Jameson area. They believe it was removed between June 10th and June 12th, adding that it weighs 800 pounds and usually needs a hydraulic lift to move it. Some strong thieves when we return, how COVID-19 is leading to new tragic highs in the opioid crisis.
This pandemic, the supply chain has been broken.
It is a serious public health emergency taking place right now, and our decision makers seem to be ignoring it.
As professional sports leagues are getting closer to restarting, it's looking more and more like Toronto is one of the cities that could be hosting a lot of games. Greg Ross is live for us tonight at the Coca-Cola Coliseum. And Greg, it looks like that location is on the short list for the NHL teams to play.
It looks like it, Dwight. The NHL is going to cross all of its T's and dot all of its I's before making any decision on hub cities to host NHL games. If they are able to restart, they're looking at a number of things, but most importantly, the safety of players. And Toronto remains on that short list to be a hub city to host games, and it's not because there's a great NHL facility here in the Scotiabank Arena. No, it appears the league is more interested in the exhibition grounds where I'm standing right now. Not only is there arena here in the Coca-Cola Coliseum, as you mentioned, Dwight, but there are some other amenities that league officials are very interested in. As the NHL narrows down its list of hub cities, insiders say the league is taking a very close look at Toronto, and specifically the exhibition grounds.
It seems like an area you can actually kind of lock down.
Rogers Sportsnet hockey analyst Justin Bourne says the X grounds are attractive because the league could create a bubble where a number of teams could quarantine with a hotel and arena in close proximity.
It's kind of the perfect hosting venue. It's wide open down there, beautiful hotel. The Coca-Cola Coliseum is formerly Ricoh. It's a great building. It's a great rink that teams could use.
The Encare Center also has plenty of room for teams to set up training facilities. Across town, plans are being put in place to host baseball at the Rogers Center.
Today, over at the ballpark, members of the Blue Jays staff are actually going through and doing a walkthrough of all the logistics that are required to make this thing go from practice to a modified camp to games.
Blue Jays on Sportsnet reporter Arash Madani says Major League Baseball teams are expected to report to their home cities on July 1st, but the Jays still haven't received clearance from the federal government for players and staff to cross the border.
2 trucks are parked in Dunedin loading everything up to make the trip north. As of now, the Blue Jays have themselves a charter flight scheduled to go Wednesday, pending government approval.
Major League Baseball is proposing a shortened 60-game season with all teams playing in their home ballparks. But this has raised some questions over the safety of players from the Jays and other teams traveling back and forth from the U.S.
I think if you can bubble the teams, you can do it. It's going to be expensive. It's going to be complicated. But
infection control epidemiologist at the University of Toronto, Colin Furness, says the league would need strict travel guidelines to protect players, and they would need to remain isolated at home and on the road.
What you probably want to do is have trained infection control preventionists moving with the teams, being very careful, being right on top of it. It's not just that infection prevention is everyone's responsibility. Someone's got to be in charge. I think someone's got to be making those decisions.
It seems the province is already on board with NHL hockey and Major League Baseball being played in Toronto this year. Doug Ford saying at his press conference today that they're waiting on the federal government to make an announcement, and they say that they only need to make a few tweaks in order for the Blue Jays to be able to return here on July 1st, which is Wednesday, Dwight.
Yeah, the NBA needs to come to this side of the border too. Thank you for that, Greg. A number of child care centers in Toronto are reopening today, and some parents are feeling relieved but a bit apprehensive.
We've been working during the COVID. We are happy to have the child care, but we just have to trust that the city is making sure they put the correct policies in place to make sure the children are safe.
11 of the 47 city-operated child care centers are now open to help parents who are returning to work. The centers are required to follow strict health and safety measures, including screening before entering the center and limiting visitors. Licensed child care services were allowed to reopen more than 2 weeks ago as part of the province's reopening plan. The city plans to gradually open more centers in July and August. As COVID-19 cases are dropping in our city, overdose deaths continue to rise. Advocates say the opioid crisis is worsening under the shadow of the pandemic. Lauren Pelly explains.
People are extremely scared. With this pandemic, the supply chain has been broken. And so there's not a lot of access to
too fresh opioids, too fresh supply.
Harm reduction worker Akia Munga says physical distancing also means less room at safe consumption sites.
Folks use off-site, folks use in alleys, folks use in the park, folks use in places that they feel comfortable and that are accessible to them at the time, but we're not there.
Advocates warn tainted drugs and less access to support is a deadly combination. As the pandemic progressed, the number of fatal suspected overdose calls reported by Toronto paramedics started going up. 25 suspected overdose deaths were reported in April, marking the highest monthly count in nearly 3 years. Then in May, paramedics reported another 25 people died.
Overdoses are having a deadly impact on people who use drugs on the streets, and COVID has made it even worse.
Toronto's Board of Health wants more support for harm reduction efforts from higher levels of government.
It is a serious public health emergency taking place right now, and our decision makers seem to be ignoring it.
So this is a basic kit.
The board is calling on the federal government to increase funding for safe supply programs, and Health Canada officials say they are working to fund those kinds of sites, with more details to come once agreements are finalized. As for what steps the province is taking,
we know that there's more work that we need to do, both in terms of the consumption and treatment services sites, but also
Munga, who is also a drug user, is concerned that without swift action, the death toll could keep rising.
This lack of access to spaces, this lack of access to safety is what we as people who use substances are left with because of the lack of care and the lack of consideration from provincial and federal government.
Lauren Pelly, CBC News, Toronto.
When we come back, airlines are easing rules when it comes to social distancing, so how safe is it really to travel by air?
Being near somebody for longer periods of time, that increases your risk, even in a office setting, for example. So therefore, the shorter flights, less risky, whereas the longer flights, you may have a chance of breathing in the virus.
Porter Airlines is aiming to restart service at the end of August. All Porter flights were grounded March 21st due to the coronavirus. Flights were supposed to resume at the end of July, but that has now been pushed back to August 31st. Porter's CEO says they are optimistic border closures and mandatory quarantines will begin easing by then. Any flights booked between now and August 31st will have their change and cancellation fees waived. Canada's two biggest airlines are about to relax onboard physical distancing measures, and that has caused a concern among many travelers and health officials. Ashley Burke has more.
And I'm just going to take your temperature, if you don't mind.
Flying during a pandemic comes with a host of new safety measures, but one is about to end, blocking off middle seats.
We both feel pretty uneasy about it.
Sarah Antonio and her husband booked a 6-hour flight from Toronto to Vancouver. It's for a crucial business trip next month. They only booked it because WestJet's website assured them the middle seat would be empty.
So we took some comfort in this option, and seeing that me and my husband are from the same household, we thought, oh, that's great. We're just going to have a row to ourselves. I'll take the window, you take the aisle, and we'll have a whole row.
But WestJet and Air Canada announced Friday that they're ending the practice on July 1st, a move in line with other airlines, including Flair. The carriers say new cleaning protocols, air filtration systems, mandatory mask wearing, and temperature checks make the risk of transmitting COVID-19 low. Well, the cost of blocking off middle seats is high, but it's a move that could backfire with customers.
For some passengers, it is a big deal, and they will, in fact, move their travel arrangements to other airlines that do offer that middle seat, or will delay their travel.
Transport Canada has recommended that airlines physically distance when possible to prevent the spread of COVID-19, but it's not mandatory.
You must wear the face mask at all times during the boarding process.
Doctors say even though it is safer to fly now, it isn't risk-free.
We now know that being near somebody for longer periods of time, that increases your risk, even in an office setting, for example. So therefore, the shorter flights, less risky, whereas the longer flights, you may have a chance of breathing in the virus.
Air Canada says the adjacent seat policy was meant to be a temporary measure, and like WestJet, it's counting on its new protocols to keep passengers safe. Meanwhile, many customers are still angry that they haven't been refunded for flights canceled due to COVID-19. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
Music superstar The Weeknd is donating $500,000 to hospitals in the city's East End that are battling COVID-19. The Grammy Award winner says he wants to give back to the community where he grew up. The donation was made to the Scarborough Health Network Foundation. Half of the money was raised through The Weeknd's XO-branded face masks. The other half was matched by the artist himself. The Scarborough Foundation says the donation will bolster its emergency fund and be used to purchase equipment the hospital needs, including ventilators, ICU beds, and personal protective equipment. And his new album is really good because it kind of has an 80s sound to it, but I love it when these kids grow up in a neighborhood, make it this big, and remember to give back, like Dad called it.
Yeah, I love it. I already liked him. Now I just like him even more, right? That's awesome. Yeah, I love that. That's some great news. Some good news, too. If you're just looking for summertime weather, we have that for you. The heat continuing. There's a few areas that'll see some rain, but, you know, it's really mostly just going to be a dry and sunny week. So I'm going to kind of show you the areas where we could get into some of these isolated showers and some thunderstorm activity, but mostly for the next couple of days, it's upper 20s, so it's slightly cooler than today. So that's kind of through Canada Day. And then after that, from Thursday onward, and I mean through the weekend, it's hot, so it's back to the low 30s, feeling like we're into the mid 30s with the humidex values. So our current temperatures are still holding on, with the exception there, Oshawa at 27 and Kitchener at 29, Hamilton 29. We've got our readings coming in here at 30 to 31 degrees. So Toronto 31 right now. Earlier, we were talking, Dwight and I, about the humidity and the values in terms of how it was feeling, whether it's sticky or not. Our dew points are still kind of in the teens here. When they get up towards 20 or in the low 20s, that's when it's really oppressive. So it is humid, but our humidex value is about 32, 34 there. It's not terrible yet. It will be towards the end of the week getting stickier and stickier. So a few isolated little showers, kind of little storm there showing up. It's going to lose some of its energy over the lake, but then that coming back across the lake and showing up later later on tonight they're in the Niagara region, but that's just about it. Otherwise it's dry. Now towards tomorrow we may see a little bit of isolated activity, just some of that lake breeze kind of giving some isolated showers north and to the east of the city. As we go towards Canada Day into the afternoon, some scattered showers and thunderstorms, also that potential, but they're really very widely spread. So mostly it's dry and it's sunny in terms of the conditions we're going to have. Tonight, 18, 19 for those overnight lows, mostly clear skies. Tomorrow, again, mostly dry, upper 20s, slightly cooler than today. And that's what I mean for Canada Day. For the holiday, it's 29, but look at this. Thursday through the weekend, Dwight, those low 30s feeling like 35 or even a little higher, a little hotter.
We'll take it. It only happens for a short while here in Canada.
Yes, yes, I take as much of it as I can.
Thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
In the first major abortion case in the Trump era, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down a law restricting services in Louisiana. In a 5-4 decision, the Chief Justice sided with 4 other liberal colleagues who ruled access to abortion clinics was too difficult in the state. 2 Trump-appointed justices, Brett Kavanaugh and Neil Gorsuch, did not agree. Pro-choice activists say they're relieved by the decision. Another Louisiana law banning abortions as early as 6 weeks into pregnancy is still making its way through the courts. A UN-based advocacy group says Ottawa is flouting its human rights obligations by not repatriating citizens detained in northeastern Syria. Many of those held in Kurdish-controlled camps and prisons are former ISIS fighters and their families, including children. But the Liberal government says the volatile situation in the region limits their ability to interfere. Renee Filipponi has more on the new report released by Human Rights Watch.
The conditions are described as filthy and often inhumane and life-threatening in the camps and prisons where at least 47 Canadians are being held. 26 of them are children, many very young, and include orphans. They're being detained in facilities run by Kurdish forces because of alleged ties to ISIS. Human Rights Watch interviewed detainees, aid workers, and the families of Canadians in those camps. They described the prisons as overcrowded and lacking food, and the camps where women and children are being held have inadequate shelter, no clean water, and are becoming increasingly dangerous as extremism grows. The report is highly critical of the Canadian government and says it's violating its international and human rights obligations by failing to take the necessary steps to repatriate citizens who they say are being held unlawfully.
Detained by a Kurdish-led authority that wants Canada and other governments to repatriate its nationals. But at the same time, the Canadian government has no plan to do so, has taken no action. As some family members have told us, the Canadian government won't even lift a finger.
Human Rights Watch is calling on Canada to rehabilitate, reintegrate, and, if appropriate, prosecute its citizens if they've been involved with ISIS, and also to provide proper consular support for the people there and their families in Canada looking for information. The Canadian government says it's aware of the people being detained by Kurdish authorities and are particularly concerned about the children, but that given the security situation there, the ability to provide any kind of consular assistance in Syria remains extremely limited.
We continue to engage in consular cases around the globe. The situation in Syria continues to be extremely dangerous. There are countries that have presence on the ground in Syria. Canada is not one of those countries.
A number of Canada's allies have repatriated some of their citizens from these camps in northeast Syria, including Germany, France, and the United States. Renee Filipponi, CBC News, London.
When we come back, we get you ready for tonight's virtual Juno Awards, plus a recap of a historic BET Awards from last night, not just because it was forced to go virtual thanks to the coronavirus. Much more to this one. We're back in just a few minutes. It was a milestone BET Awards last night. This is its 20th year, and for the first time, it was broadcast on network television. Eli Glasner joins us now with more on this. And Eli, more than anything, this show was memorable for how it spoke to the moment. So give us some of the highlights.
Yeah, I mean, right from the get-go, Dwight, the message of the show was our culture can't be canceled. There was a palpable sense of anger and pride and certainly no lack of something to say. Now, I'm a little old school when it comes to my favorite hip-hop and R&B, so I'm going to start with one of my faves, Public Enemy. Yes, Chuck D and Flavor Flav coming back, resuscitating the anthem, Fight the Power, now with a bit of an update. Take a look.
The year is 2020, the number. Another summer, get down. Sound of the funky drummer.
Down to the funky drummer, indeed. There you go. Chuck D updating the lyrics. Not 1989 anymore. Now it's 2020, but no, still for sure as powerful as ever. You see Nas, you see Black Thought, you see Questlove from The Roots, and to have that anthem intercut with the protests, really quite something. That message remains as, relevant as ever. And Public Enemy was just one of many artists using the awards last night. Like, really, the awards kind of took a backseat to those videos and ways of presenting these songs in a new way. And the next artist I want to talk about is DaBaby. Now, he is a hip-hop artist who's very big right now on TikTok, become a bit of a phenomenon. Rockstar is one of his big songs. Normally, he's rapping about Glocks and Lamborghinis, but take a look at what he did with his video presentation last night.
Police pull their guns like they scared of me. And we used to have. Treat us not as the scared thing. Want anything we good at and we cherish it. Now we all fed up and news coming back for everything. Rock stars, just watch the news. They burning cop cars. Kill another nigga, break the law and call us outlaws. What happened? Want us to keep it peaceful. Should've seen them hating, When I bought that Lamborghini, throw up my middle finger. Police can't catch me this up.
Right there, I mean, obviously a reference to George Floyd, very powerful from DaBaby, updating what he has to sing with Rockstar. And he was just one of many. Megan Thee Stallion, you might know her from TikTok. She has that song Savage. It's become a bit of an earworm of the summer. She had a new video with a bit of a Black Lives Matter makeover, but also a lot of shades of Mad Max Fury Road, almost kind of apocalyptic vibe with her out there in the desert. I also want to point out, I mean, one of the things I've been wondering, Dwight, where are the protest songs? Like, where are the artists that are going to sing to this moment and actually start making new music about what is happening in America, in the streets? Anderson .Paak had an amazing performance, an amazing track called Lockdown, where he combined forces with J-Rock and really was quite something. You should check that out. But finally, not to be outdone, Beyonce was honored last night with the Humanitarian Award, presented no less by Michelle Obama. Now, typically with Beyonce, she lets her art do her talking, but last night she was explicit, telling the protesters, we have to vote like our life depends on it, because it does, and thanking them for their efforts. And then she shared this, and so no surprise from Beyonce, this time we get a little warning. There is a new visual album or movie coming. It will be at the end of July on Disney+, and it's called Black is King, inspired by the making of the new Lion King film. Will also feature Childish Gambino, Kendrick Lamar, and that looks amazing. So there you go, something new coming from Beyonce that she shared last night as part of the awards.
Yeah, certainly a powerful evening there. Now, tonight is another virtual awards show, ours, the Junos. What should we expect from them?
All right, so tune in 7 p.m. CBC Music and the CBC Gem app. The show goes on. We need to find a way to celebrate our best. Alessia Cara was going to host, but now she's presenting a new song. There's going to be performances by her, by Neon Dreams, by Dead South, Tom Powers, Adaria Williams, Finn from Stranger Things, all sorts of talent. Andrew Fung from Kim's Convenience will be presenting. So should be a nice night, virtual or not, tonight starting at 7.
Thank you, Eli. When we come back, a few words from the valedictorians of the 2020 graduating class.
As the graduating class of 2020, we are the only class who's had to work through a pandemic.
And as cliche as it may sound, work hard.
This is our time, right here, right now.
As students mark the end of their school year, many of them are also celebrating graduation. CBC Toronto reached out to school boards across the GTA to hear from some grade 8 and 12 students selected as their class valedictorian. We asked them to record a part of their speeches that they would have said at their ceremonies. Take a listen.
Class of 2020. We can be the class of change.
As a valedictorian, you may think I'd be disappointed with no ceremony, but there are definitely bigger problems going on in the world.
And our time back home has allowed us, more than any other graduating class, to fully consider and prepare for our futures.
Senior year was certainly a crazy ride for all of us, but the resilience we have embodied has helped us become more optimistic and rise above these hard times.
The valedictorian
is someone who truly believes, as cliche as it might sound, that our generation will change the world.
What this pandemic can't take away is the countless hours that we've spent working towards our goals, the sleepless nights that we've devoted to our dreams, and the aspirations that we have for our future.
On behalf of the graduating class of 2020, we will remember you and we will miss you.
As we progress to grade 9, we hope that you can take time to relax and remember all the good times you've had throughout the years. We are all very highly talented people who will undoubtedly change the world for the greater good.
Being valedictorian is truly an honor for me, especially in the unprecedented times in which our society is currently going through. Most specifically, the race war in which our society is facing. As a young Black woman, there is no doubt that there are odds stacked against me and my people. And though there are people who doubt us, they cannot deny our success when it's right in their faces. That's why being valedictorian is so important, not just for me as the person holding the title, but for the lower classmen at my school or anybody watching this who doubts themselves and their capabilities.
Although we may have lost out in our last few months of high school, we should not let that take away from all the amazing moments we've had during our high school years. As the graduating class of 2020, we are the only class who's had to work through a pandemic. We will overcome this, and as such, we will overcome anything.
High school may be full of moments that you regret. Recognize your mistake, take responsibility for it, and learn from it. Never let a mistake hold you back. All it should be is a stepping stone to help you improve in the future.
I am very excited to see what the future holds for all of our graduate students, and I want to say a huge thank you to all the teachers that made our graduating year unforgettable.
I truly believe that what is going on can only make us stronger, even if it doesn't seem so at this moment. Remember, there's a future ahead for us.
As I mentioned in my speech, probably inspired by too much Netflix, graduation feels like the series finale of your favorite show. You know, you've kind of been expecting it for a while, and still, it's really sad because it's been a part of your life for so long. What's even harder is that you can't say a proper goodbye. And now, suddenly it's time for your new show.
This may be the end of 8th grade, but the real journey has just begun. This is our time, right here, right now. If you haven't noticed, this world, while providing great opportunities for some, still creates unjust barriers for others. It needs more young, active global citizens who are willing to work towards a more equitable, just, and sustainable planet. So be active in your communities, educate yourselves, take on new challenges, take a stand, be leaders, and most importantly, start now.
The graduates of 2020 will never be able to experience prom and graduation like the other graduating classes have enjoyed. We all share a common bond. This pandemic has had a great impact in all our lives. However, we stayed connected and persevered with each other during these challenging times.
To me, the class of 2020 truly defines the word resilient. And no matter what obstacles we face on our road to victory, we will always come out as champions. Now go, write a new story that features so many more unforgettable memories. Because that's who we are, class of 2020. We are memorable.
Let this graduation be a new beginning full of hope, desire, love, and blessings. No matter your age, no matter your gender, no matter your race or ethnicity, each and every one of you are amazing and beautiful. Stand up for what you believe in, and do that with happiness and pride.
In life, we're going to continue to grow as people and change even more. But the 4 years I've spent with my classmates have allowed us to create a bond that is going to stay with me as I move forward. I truly enjoyed my high school experience and the friends I made during it, and the memories that we made together are going to stay with me.
Wherever it is that you're going, whether that's university, college, or straight into the workforce, and as cliche as it may sound, work hard. Write down your goals for different aspects of your life on a piece of paper and read them aloud before you start your day.
Use your confidence to find your voice. Use your voice to incite justice. And use this justice to create a better world. A world without discrimination, hate, or violence. A world where we can show just how amazing we can be as humans.
I'd like to congratulate every student during these tough times. Let's not lose focus, but rather maintain our strength of the hurdles that life gives us going forward.
Congratulations once again to the class of 2020. We did it.
Congratulations, class of 2020. We finally made it.
Thank you to all those future leaders. That's our show for tonight. Thank you for joining us. Mike Wise has you covered. After the National at 11, we will see you back here tomorrow at 6. Have a great night, everybody.